Dr. Duncan Robertson is a policy and stats expert at Loughborough University and a fellow of St. Catherine's College, Oxford. He's been focusing on COVID-19 for the last year and has taken a look at the latest figures today. Dr. Duncan Robertson, welcome. So, relatively speaking, how much virus is in the UK right now?
Well, I think it was interesting what JVT was saying about, the levels being comparable to September. And of course, that's absolutely true. But, you have to look a bit further back to the end of July. And, we're about a quarter of that. So, we are at low levels, but it kind of depends what you compare it to. So if you look back into, summer last year, we were at very low levels. And, we're at higher levels, but, we're at a minimum, really, I think. And what happens next is really this sort of battle between the virus, the vaccines and the variants. And it's more difficult to predict because you have those kind of interacting effects, which makes it, kind of more risky.
Of course. And on the subject of variants, of course, we've been talking about this for a lot of the show, actually. There feels like there's two different stories going on at the moment. So there's the UK story and there's quite a bit of positive news coming out. And then we're seeing what's happening in a lot of the rest of the world, India in particular. Now, when it comes to India and the idea of variants, and we look at those numbers, some of those numbers, of course, are just very alarming. Does that pose a problem for us in the UK?
Well, I think, we have to look at the kind of context that we're in the UK. And of course, we were the country that came across one of the, most severe variants to start off with, the kind of B117, the Kent variant, which we're all very familiar with now. And this really affected this very strong lockdown that we've been in and are coming out of, and are coming out in these sort of sequential steps. So everything kind of gets compared against that Kent variant. Mm-hmm. But as more and more transmission happens, more and more variants happen, and you start listening to the ones that become the most prevalent in the country. So of course the South Africa variant was, I suppose, one of the first, and then we talked about the Brazil variant, the Manaus variant, and now we're on to these variants, the India variants. And of course, it's a bit unfair kind of giving them country names because in a way it's a sign of who's good at actually sequencing these things, the fact that they're able to identify these different variants. So we are starting to see a pickup in the number of variants that are being detected in the UK. So I don't know if you look at the P1, that's the Manaus variant. Mm-hmm. You'll remember, a couple of months ago, was that kind of manhunt for looking for people that had come into the country and had that P1 variant. Now, there were 6 people, and I think we kind of got that under control. But the latest figures we have 22 people with that P1 variant. We've got 67 in a week with the South Africa variant, and the India variant. We're now up to 260 cases detected this week. So it's a little bit unpredictable, but you've got to think about, is it more transmissible? Is it more harmful? Mm-hmm. And these are the things that really why the next stages of these roadmaps are really about collecting this data, seeing how these variants are spreading across the population, if they are spreading across the population,
of course,
and using that.
Of course. And Dr. Robertson, I want to get your take on this, and then I want to bring Dr. Chris in again. We heard earlier that the Office of National Statistics antibody survey says that nearly 7 in 10 adults have now got antibodies. When I hear something like that as a non-medic, I think, well, that's a game changer, isn't it? That means we can really see the light at the end of the tunnel. Is that a good assessment, or is that not realistic?
No, it's excellent. And, the fact is that we've got a tremendously successful vaccine program. But I suppose there's sort of one caveat to that. So, if you look at the number of people who've had the vaccine, it's very high. For example, over 50s, you're at very high levels. So for white people, it's 93%. For Black and African, Caribbean, Black British people, it's 65%. Of over 50s have had the vaccine. So that's a huge difference between different parts of the community. And, this virus will find places which doesn't have that immunity. So you can look at the overall country and think that's brilliant, but there are going to be pockets, and it's lots of things, whether you're in a urban versus rural, whether you're in a deprived area, and things like ethnicity added into that means that overall the country is doing very well, but the virus is going to find these weaknesses and potentially spread in those communities.
Yeah, I understand. And just one more question really is, if you had to make a prediction, especially considering this idea of 7 out of 10 adults now having antibodies, how do you think that's going to play out over the coming months? Because of course, we have heard about the possibility, at least, of a third wave. Would you say that's something we're going to see, but perhaps it's going to be more manageable? Do we still need to be really vigilant about that?
Well, this is where, as I say, it becomes more and more difficult to project what's going to happen in the future. And therefore, it really goes down to your attitude to risk. So, yes, we can, get rid of all restrictions, but that's a risky thing to do. And especially if it's kind of irreversible, then that's even more risky. So with all these things, it's not saying, there is going to be a third wave, or there's going to be a huge third wave or a small third wave. It's about really monitoring what's going on. And these sort of, Public Health England are brilliant at this surveillance, and really changing your strategy, adapting your strategy to the new information that comes in, rather than just saying there's some dates in a document and we kind of politically have to follow those. So it's about reacting, it's about getting the information and taking that into account. And that's going to be very important in the coming months.